I recently saw a large lot of Atari marketing slides from 1984 on eBay, and that reminded me. I had bought a similar lot back in 2001 or maybe 2002 from Dan Kramer at the Classic Gaming Expo in Las Vegas. Dan was an engineer at Atari in the early and mid 1980s and frequently sold and traded items at CGE. And these slides had been duplicated by CNI Photography out of San Jose, and they were super crisp, very likely original Atari marketing materials. So here are some high-resolution scans in 4K and a little bit of background information on each of these Atari products. Most of them got released, but there are also some unreleased items like the Atari Mindlink and the Futuremakers software. A big thanks to Atari Mania, some of the catalog scans came from them, and also a big shout out to Michael Kern's Atari History Timelines. All the links are in the description below. Let's start off with this awesome Atarisoft display. Atarisoft was Atari's brand name under which they released software for other consoles and home computer systems in 1983 and 1984, and they were quite successful. In the display, you can see the different colors from red for Apple II, purple, Commodore VIC-20, green, Commodore 64, orange, ColecoVision, yellow, TI-99 4A, and blue for the IBM PC. Next up is a set of 5 marketing slides for Atari 2600 games. The first one is Crystal Castles, which was announced in January of 1984 at the Winter CES in Las Vegas and released in March of 1984. Oscar's Trash Race was first announced in January at the 1983 Winter CES and then released in March of 1984. Pengo was announced at the Winter CES in January of 1984 and then released just a few months later. Stargate was also announced at the 1984 Winter CES in January and then released in 1985. And finally, Track and Field was announced in May 1984 and then released in 1985. Gremlins was the only Atari 5200 game in the marketing slides. It was announced in 1984 and then released in 1987. On to the Atari 7800, the console and all the games were shown in June 1984 at the Summer CES in Chicago. Asteroids was originally called Asteroids 3D, then renamed to Asteroids Deluxe, and finally got published as just Asteroids in 1986, and all the other games got published in 1986 as well. The history of the Atari 7800 console is quite interesting and actually a little tragic. So if you're interested in more details, there's a link in the description below where Steve Golson talks about the engineering of the Atari 7800 console and why it was delayed for so many years. Here are the original marketing slides for Food Fight and Galaga, and this is how they were used in an Atari marketing brochure for 1984. Next up is the Atari Mindling controller. The idea behind this was to use the electrical impulses of your forehead muscles as a paddle-style controller. This was supposed to come complete with a game called Bionic Breakthrough, which was kind of a breakout clone. This marketing slide is pure 80s. The colors, the shoes, the carpet. Anyway, the Mindlink controller was announced in 1984 at the Summer CES and was supposed to ship in 1985 for a suggested retail price of $79. However, it never was released. On to 8-bit software. The Atari Futuremakers series of educational software was also never released. Here you see a screenshot in the 1984 marketing brochure, and here are the original marketing slides. Now, these are real screenshots, but I suspect they're just made up. I don't think these are actual programs. The Futuremaker series was announced at the Summer CES in 1984 and was supposed to ship in September that same year. The light module for the Atari Lab series, originally called Science Lab, was announced in January 1983 and finally shipped 1985. And here's the original marketing slide that you also saw in the catalog in the lower right corner. Atari Music 1, originally called Music Tutor 1, and Atari Music 2, originally called Major Scales and Keys, were both released in early 1984. Music Composer was announced in summer of '79 at the CES in Chicago and then released in March of 1980. Atari Writer, which was originally called Wordwise, was announced in December of '82 and then shipped in the spring of 1983. Proofreader was originally released via the Atari Program Exchange under the name @Speller for Atari Writer, and then shipped as Proofreader in 1986. The Synapse productivity software shipped in spring of 1984, and the Atari Home Filing Manager shipped in 1982. Let's move on to some more educational software. Atari announced some Mickey Mouse themed software in December of 1982 as part of a larger Disney software package. It was then announced again in 1983 as Mickey in the Great Outdoors, and here you can see how that looked in the catalog. The software was shipped in the spring of 1983. Fernando Herrera first released My First Alphabet in 1981 via the Atari Program Exchange. And then in January of 1982, he won the first annual Star Award at the Atari Software Acquisition Program and got a prize of $25,000. Atari then shipped My First Alphabet as a regular program in 1982. Letter Tutor had been announced at the Summer CES in 1982 and again at the Summer CES in 1984, but it never shipped. And the final set of slides are mock-up screenshots of the game The Legacy, which was then later renamed to Final Legacy, originally announced at the Winter CES of January 1984, then again at the Summer CES in 1984, and then finally shipped in 1985. So there you have all 35 slides that were in that Atari marketing kit from 1984. I'll leave you with my two favorite ones, the awesome Atarisoft display and the seriously 1980s Mindling picture. Thanks for watching.